Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's Committee of Adjustment meeting. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. The role of the committee is to review the proposals that are before it, consider the evidence provided, and make a decision based on the 4 tests established by the Planning Act. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and others in attendance. We ask that cellular devices be switched off at this time or at least maintained on silent. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. All persons wishing to address the committee are required to provide their name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to all speakers. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the chair. Any materials presented to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Persons seeking a deferral or withdrawal of an application will be invited to do so at the onset of the meeting. If a request for a deferral is granted, it is the responsibility of the applicant to contact the Secretary-Treasurer regarding the scheduling of a new hearing date. At the request of the committee, the applicant may be asked to provide a brief presentation and answer any questions that may arise. If the applicant has concerns with the recommendations and proposed conditions found within the staff report, this is the time to advise the committee. All persons who wish to support or oppose the application will then be given an opportunity to speak to the committee. In the interest of efficiency, groups sharing the same view are asked to select a spokesperson, and individual speakers are asked not to cover the same points as those who have already spoken. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any additional questions from the committee. Discussions will then be closed and the matter taken into committee for a decision. Once the committee has made an oral decision, any person desiring a written copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided on the table at the back of the room for this purpose, and only those filing such a request will be given any subsequent notice of any appeal. Notice of the committee's decision will be mailed to the applicant and anyone who has filed a written request no later than 10 days following the decision for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the last day to appeal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the applicant and anyone who received a copy, the decision will then be notified by written correspondence. Thank you. We have one regret this evening, Mr. Flemington. Any declaration of pecuniary interests? I see none, thank you. I will now take requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications. Anyone wishing to defer or withdraw an application, this will be your opportunity to do so. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Vanessa DeValter. I am from Glenshire & Associates. Our address is located at 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Suite 700. We're the planning consultants representing the owners of the property located at 349 Stanfield Drive, which is subject to a minor variance, CAVA-054-2019. At this time, we kindly request a deferral to address some unfavorable comments provided from staff, which were presented in the report.
Very well, and you are aware that there is a deferral fee?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Members, I'm in your hands. I see no reason why we can deny this deferral, since they are working with staff and are looking to put forth a better application. All those in support? Okay. Your application has been deferred. You'll see the Secretary-Treasurer when you're ready to have the application scheduled for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Anyone else? Good evening.
My name is John Rebe at 121 Watson Avenue. This is in reference to Lot 2, now 125 Watson Avenue, request for minor variance, CAV A 056-2019. Our request for deferral is based on, we are the neighbors whose house is immediately adjacent to and literally downstream from this lot, which was formed out of a severance in July 2016. Our deferral is based on the request to have the opportunity to have both the time and documentation that was guaranteed to us in a written document signed by Mr. Lambert and Mr. Simeone in July of 2016 that would provide that, along with a site plan, a vegetation plan, a drainage plan, a grading plan, and a stormwater management plan, all reflecting the fact that that particular area and our neighbors and our lots have unique drainage issues. And we feel that particularly in this case, that because of the small size of the lot, we knew at the time that a variance request such as this would be made, and that that variance request will further stress what is already a sensitive drainage and vegetation situation.
Sorry, did you want to ask for address? Oh, can we please have your address for the record?
121 Watson Avenue.
121. And spell your name again, please.
And we have submitted a letter, a formal request for deferral that's in the record for this meeting, and I won't belabor by going through that again.
Okay, you got everything you need? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, I interrupted you. I realize that this is required material for the application, and we're happy to oblige with a deferral. Any comments or with respect or questions of the agent at this time?
This is not agent. This is neighbor.
Oh, this is the neighbor. You're the agent. Okay. We have the letter. Now, I'm sorry, I got you confused with the applicant. We do have your letter that you've provided in support of the...
Deferral.
No, not the deferral, but you gave background information with respect to the severance and the... I have it. I just want to say the right thing. Sorry. Yeah. Material that you, the appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, you gave that information.
Yes.
Yes, we have that on record. So you're requesting the deferral in order for you to have more time to present more material than this?
No, we're essentially requesting in the agreement, the letter that was written by the city to us in July of 2016, it was identified that we would be given the opportunity for peer review of a stormwater management plan, a grading plan, a vegetation plan, and a tree preservation plan. And so far, all we have seen is a site plan that makes no reference to any of those elements.
Okay. You realize that the applicant is the one who has to request a deferral, but we can hear from the applicant, and then I can speak to how your concerns will be addressed through the site planning and the whole procedure in terms of drainage and sewage and all of that goes under that preview. Are there any questions?
If I could just, we do appreciate there's a little bit of a chicken and egg here, and that the plans are based on the requirement of the footprint. I think what we're trying to do is attempt to come to a holistic agreement, because the footprint will have significant consequences on the opportunities and issues and risks raised with any subsequent drainage or vegetation plan. So we think in this case, because of the linkage between the size of the footprint and our particular concerns, that we would like to have a deferral, get an opportunity to see all that material, and work with the owner to find something that meets all our needs.
I hear you, but whatever happens in terms of drainage and site plan will not affect this committee's outlook on the actual variances that are before us, which is the lot coverage and the height. So we'd like to hear from the applicant before we speak any further in terms of a deferral. It's neither mine nor yours. It has to come from the applicant.
Certainly.
Thank you. We appreciate your time and your submission. I know this is a little bit complicated. We have all the material on hand, but we want to give you an opportunity to speak to the request of a deferral.
Yeah, I came prepared to make a presentation in hopes that you would make a ruling today. So I'm prepared to make it.
You want to move
Yes,
forward?
yes.
Okay, very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, anyone else? All right, so with that, we will start the first item on our agenda. Oh, someone else is coming down. Sorry, I didn't see your hand there.
Yes, good evening, committee. My name is Roger Selby from 117 Watson Avenue, which is the property south and adjacent to that of John Rive, who you just heard from.
Oh, we're not speaking to that application yet. We are now speaking.
Well, I'm here to continue the discussion on the deferral.
You cannot. It's.
I'm sorry,
it's the discussion is complete.
But the town guaranteed to the neighbourhood that we would have an opportunity to see all of the reports that Mr. Rive just spoke about. We have not been given that opportunity. All we received was the notice less than 2 weeks ago to say there was a committee of adjustment meeting. Between July of 2016, when that letter was issued and guaranteeing us this opportunity to see all of these documents, we have not been given that opportunity. I understand that Sarah Gillians wrote to the town back in September of 2018 asking for a status report, and there was nothing provided at that stage. We do not see there is any purpose in having a committee of adjustment meeting for a variance which at the present time isn't in keeping with the neighbourhood or the properties adjacent to that property. And given the fact that we as a neighbourhood deferred going to the OMB at the request of the town back in July 2016, to have this now presented as a variance is frankly incorrect. It is wrong. And
Okay,
we should now be given the opportunity to defer this, and we should be able to work with the owner and the agent.
I've given you a chance to speak. Now you will allow me, as the chair of this committee, to explain to you that those two processes can run in tandem, and that is why we are here today. We are here to look at the variance application, notwithstanding what else is happening with this property. And I appreciate your concern as a neighbor, and I do respect every submission at this, but right now you're not showing us as a committee the respect that we deserve. I have explained to you that this matter has been completed. As per our procedural bylaws, we've asked whether the applicant would request a deferral based on your submissions, and the applicant chose to proceed with their application.
Well, clearly, why would they do otherwise?
Excuse me. At this point in time, we must proceed with the applications, and you are welcome to sit down and then speak your part, and then we will see how this application proceeds. This is not the venue in which you can protest how you feel about this application, and nor is it the time. The time right now is for you to take a seat and allow us to proceed until we get to the Watson application, and believe you me, I will give you your 5 minutes to speak to it.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to call the first application on our agenda tonight, and that is CAV 049 at 3194 Shoreline Drive. Good evening.
Good evening.
Your name and address.
My name is
please.
Michael Barton. I am the applicant and also the planning consultant for the owners. My address is 1489 Abbeywood Drive in Oakville. My company is MB1 Development Consulting.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. If you just give me a moment to canvass the room. Who is here for application CAV 049 of 2019 at 3194 Shoreline Drive? Who is here in attendance for this application? Okay. So you are all in opposition, and I'm assuming you would like to speak. Are you all speaking to the committee, or have you elected a spokesperson? You've elected those two people to speak on your behalf. Are you, on this side of the, I'm trying to canvass both sides. Are you speaking, or are you part of this group?
No, we're speaking as well. We're owners, and we have someone else.
Very well. Just so that I know who is speaking to the committee. Yes.
Maybe another member that will be speaking.
Okay, fine. I'm just getting an idea of how many people are speaking to this application. So, Mr. Barton, you'll take us through your application, and then we'll give the neighbors a chance to speak, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here before you. As we mentioned, it's 3194 Shoreline Drive. As an introduction, this is definitely, I've done many applications before the committee here and a number of municipalities. This is definitely a situation where the tests of the Planning Act and the reasons for the tests are there. An evaluation of whether something represents good planning cannot be based on numbers alone. Given the subjectivity of the tests under the Planning Act, not everyone will have the same opinion when they're reviewing a proposal. The guiding policy should be the livable Oakville plan within the context of the proposal. The owners of this property have met with town staff on several occasions. The most recent was November 2018. I do have a correspondence that I will pass to the committee, which is an email from the local councillor. He facilitated this meeting, and he notes in this correspondence that the point of the meeting was to come up with an understanding of what limits our staff are willing to cede to, though everything up till the point of our staff writing a formal recommendation is without prejudice. I sat in the meeting with you and your staff and understand what I heard, and if something changes to the process, I ultimately have council will benefit from my knowledge and we make the ultimate decision. We understood from the meeting that an extra 700 square feet GFA was a number staff were more comfortable with and that they felt they could support. So this goes on, and I will provide this, it is an email to the committee. So as I've noted here, the owners proceeded in good faith on the basis of that meeting. They have a total floor area that's slightly less than 700 square feet greater than the existing house. That translates to just over 3,000 square feet and a floor area ratio of 57.5%. This is a reduction from the original application, which had a 60.9% floor area ratio. The reduced area was not the original option, but the owners did work with staff to come up with a compromise. The owners have met with the neighbors in the community and received verbal and written support for the application. This slide shows the signatures where these people said, as residents of Shoreline Drive, they have no objections to the proposed demolition and the existing dwelling and construction of the proposed dwelling as detailed in the Committee of Adjustment application. The map beside it shows the location of these residents. So the variances requested are to permit a minimum setback from the front lot line to the front of the garage of 5.57 meters versus 5.7 meters, to permit a minimum rear yard of less than 7.5, 6.34 proposed, to permit a maximum floor area ratio greater than 43% with 57.5 proposed, to permit a maximum lot coverage greater than 35%, 39.63% proposed, and to permit a private garage projection of greater than 1.5 meters, 4.36 proposed. This aerial shows you a context of the area with the lake to the top of the map. The second one in from Shoreline Drive is the subject property with the pool, as you can see. I will show it on a different map as well, but it does give you an idea of how Shoreline curves and bends relative to the lake, as well as the garage projections that exist on many of those properties. Here's the zoning map. I've broken it up into two so that you can see a little bit more clearly. So this property sits in an RL3 zone. It's a relatively small pocket. As you can see, there's RL5 to the north and RL2 to the south. From a visual feel perspective, you have this large open space area behind the property that goes to the lake. In many instances to the north, the properties extend all the way to the lake. In this case, land was taken from the property to provide this open space. So when you look at it from this perspective, you don't have other residences behind the subject property that would be impacted by development. So if you were to look at this from a theoretical perspective, that lot as shown would be almost 900 square meters. And in that case, you would see a floor area ratio of around 39% and a lot coverage of around 22%. Again, theoretically understanding that's not how zoning works. So the proposal is demolition of the existing dwelling, construction of a new dwelling, adhering to the minimum side yard setbacks, maintaining the existing front yard tree, maintaining the existing front yard setback in alignment to the street, having a building lower than the maximum building height permitted under the zoning. In reviewing all this information, it was my opinion that constructing a dwelling that conforms to the zoning regulations would result in a house that's out of character with the existing neighborhood. Here's the proposed site plan. As you can see, the shaded area is the existing dwelling. So you can see the front of the house is situated the same distance from the street, has the same alignment to the road. At the rear, it is only a small portion that is actually within that rear yard setback. It is a portion of that circular kitchen eating area, which is a one-story small area. Here are proposed front and rear elevations. And then from the side. When we look at the existing house versus what's proposed, you can see the character of it's similar in massing and floor area and lot coverage. Merits of the proposal really quickly. The design is intended to respect the existing built form character of the neighborhood, not the stringent zoning regulations. The setback to the front of the proposed garage will be the same as existing. The proposed garage projection is actually less than the existing garage projection from the house. As I mentioned, it's only a portion of that semicircular area that sits within the rear yard setback. The proposed side yard setbacks are only minimally different from existing and will be within the zoning regulations. The proposed dwelling has a similar footprint not only to the existing house, but also the other dwellings in the neighborhood. Okay. Okay, I was just trying to respond to the correspondence that we've received from the neighbors. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll move quickly. So from a neighborhood context, we do see that this lot is the smallest in the neighborhood. It's about 11% smaller than the minimum lot size, so the lot size does not meet the current zoning regulations. It's more similar in size to the RL5 zone to the north in terms of what the lots are permitted. The presence of Lake Ontario and the open space behind provides a de facto extension of the lot in terms of that feel that I was speaking about, what you would feel from this house being constructed on the property. In terms of community character, I'll just move through these, but these are houses on Shoreline and Cudmore that you can see the character of large two-story dwelling, garage projections in most cases. This is the character of the neighborhood. Now you could talk about these houses. The staff had mentioned this is a different zone. This is about a 10-second drive down Shoreline. To me, that is within the area of influence and an area of character. Character is defined by the variability in lot sizes and built form. When we look at these two houses side by side, this is the subject property on the right and the neighbor on the left. The neighboring property is actually slightly higher, and the built form character is relatively the same. Here is a property that you can see on Cudmore if you're standing in the driveway of the subject property. This is part of the community character, obviously much larger in scale than what was being proposed. And I'm happy to come back to this other information if it's necessary. We threw this in a solar analysis. So what we're showing here, this is from the online sunset analysis, sunrise analysis. You can see how during the summer solstice, the sunrise and the sunset coming in to the property, there's no impacts created through the subject property.
Very well. We'll give the neighbors a chance to speak to the committee, and then we'll have you
Okay.
come back
Sure.
and answer their concerns, and I'm sure you'll be able to pull some of that material back
Yes.
in
Thank you
order
very
to.
much.
They still can't fix it. Okay, who would like to address the committee first? Okay, just give me a moment. I can't see. Okay. Okay. Your name and address for the record, please?
David Spencer, 3196 Shoreline Drive.
3196,
Shoreline Drive.
okay.
My wife and I have lived at 3196 Shoreline Drive for the past 35 years. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and our neighbors on Shoreline Drive, Cudmore Road, Sandy Lane, and Skipper Lane, who have signed a petition objecting to the proposed new build at 3194. I have a map which shows that where the people live in the area who signed the petition. I have also the petition to give to you. While obtaining the 33 signatures, the one comment made by the neighbors was that that moved to this area to get away from huge oversized homes on small lots that are not keeping with the character of the neighborhood and not compatible with adjacent homes. When a picture was shown of the proposed new build, the comment was always, why would they build a house like that in this neighborhood? The proposed new build is on the smallest lot of the 6 houses on the lake in our section of the street, and it will have the second largest house. Our neighbor at 3202, who happens to be at the meeting tonight, renovated their home, and I believe, I'll see if I can give you I don't know where the picture is of, but 3202 Shoreline Drive renovated their home, put an addition on the back, and maintained the original house design at the front. He has not offended the neighbor's view or privacy. It should be noted that the home conforms to the present zoning and bylaw regulations. I believe that that is a 9,000 square foot lot with a 3,500 square foot home. I'm within 5% of that. So he's complied with a 43%, okay, and he's on a 9,000 square foot, and he's got 3,500 or 3,600. My neighbor is wanting 57% on a 5,350 square foot lot. As a side view, Cudmore Road, I don't know if you know Cudmore Road, it's an area in transition, okay? And the picture that was shown here by the consultant on Cudmore Road, that is like a 8,000 or 9,000 square foot lot. And all the homes on Cudmore Road are 10,000 or 9,000. They're huge. So to think that is a comparable. And the other issue is, are you really going to say that the lake and the waterfront is part of a calculation? What if I lived on a railway track? Suppose I live into a natural area off Great Lakes Boulevard. Are we really going to take vacant land and say, well, gee, it's vacant behind? Well, you're right. Their next neighbor is 35 kilometers away. But really, you're going to take park land and use that in a calculation? Okay. Some issues I have with the proposed new build are the existing GFA is 33%. The proposed new build is asking for 57%. This is a 35% increase of existing zoning and bylaws with 700 additional square feet. I don't know how many more square feet it is, but it's a lot more. And in the consultant stating that, gee, they wanted 61% and now they've accepted 57.5%. When they're allowed 43, should we be thankful for that kind of a, A larger house next door will have the negative impact in that it will have reduced exposure to open spaces, light, sky, and sunlight on the east side of our home. If built, we will look at a solid wall 9 feet from our dining room window. We presently have 35 feet of open space, light, sky, and sunlight. Our living room and front patio will have a wall protruding beyond this existing wall, blocking the light and the sky in the open area. This summer solstice, don't know what it means. I can explain it to you. Our dining room window is here. We see 35 feet of open area to our neighbor's breakfast room. When that wall is built, if I go up to the window and turn that way, I'll see the lake and the sun. So to say that a summer solstice, what is that, 1 day or 3 days? What's that mean? We're not getting it. We're not going to get the light that we presently have that was originally there. So I think that's kind of, I don't know. The proposed new build means that we will face a stone wall 50% bigger than what exists today. Their wall would be 4 to 5 feet higher on the roof line. The proposed new build will be 1 foot closer to our property line. The rear of the proposed new build will be 4 feet closer to the town parkland. My question is, why? This house is already big. Why would, and we have people walking by, we have a resident here, we have people walking by the parkland, and now you want to be, we have 25, I think we're allowed 25 feet, now you want to be 21 feet. Like, what makes this house break all the rules and the variances? Just because somebody wants to build a big home on a small lot.
Mr. Spencer,
The
you're...
type, sorry, I've just got 1 minute, sorry, I'm almost there. The type of house design, the bulk, the scale, and mass are not compatible with our neighborhoods as described in the livable Oakville standards. And believe you me, if you come down to our 6 houses and you go and implant his house next to ours, it's totally different. And actually, in the consultant's report here, I believe, there's a picture of his house on the very front. If you look at all,
If you put it down on the blue mat, it'll actually project on our screens. Turn it, no, just turn it the same way you were looking at it. The camera's right
Oh,
on
I
top
see.
of it. Yeah. The blue mat.
oh, I'm
The
sorry,
blue mat.
okay. Yeah, all right. This way?
Perfect.
If I look at that and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that looks like, yeah, that really looks like the other homes here. Let's take a look at it. That's my home. My car. That's my neighbor that's beside. There's 2 of us beside this building.
We've done our site visits, so we're familiar with the area. We've all
Okay.
seen the houses.
Okay, so my point is, quite frankly, you must be kidding. You think that house that matches what's there.
So your 5 minutes are up.
I just need
30 more seconds? Okay.
1 minute.
30 more seconds. I've already given
The
you a
majority
minute
of
and a
owners in the
half.
neighborhood are asking that the existing bylaws be respected. The proposed new bill is allowed to go ahead. It opens the gates for every builder to ignore current bylaws, zoning, and livable Oakville standards. It's a bad precedent. The proposed new bill is not asking for minor variances. Rather, it appears to me to be a rezoning. It should be noted that Google defines the word as minor. It should be noted that Google defines the word minor as slight, small, insignificant, inconsequential, negligible, trivial, paltry, and petty. I don't see this anywhere here. I previously asked my neighbor, who's building the home, wants to build, one benefit we would derive from the proposed new build, and he stated that my house would increase in value. I believe that the proposed new build would be a detriment. We do not want to live beside a huge home that is not in keeping with our neighborhood, and I doubt a potential purchaser would. The message is simple. If the owners of 3194 do not want to adhere to current zoning and bylaws anywhere, then buy a large lot and build a large home and leave our neighbors and neighborhood alone. In closing, I hope you will uphold the bylaws, zoning, and livable Oakville standards, thereby respecting our property rights and protecting our beautiful neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Who is next? And if I kindly ask you not to repeat the same points, I would really appreciate that.
I'll do my best. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Audrey Briggs.
Briggs?
Briggs.
Briggs.
Weldon and I have
And
owned our
your
home.
address?
3190 Shoreline Drive.
3190 Shoreline Drive. Thank you, Ms. Briggs.
We've owned our home for 36 years. We are the original owners of the property, one of 6 houses on the lake. I would like to add, we were the first to move in on the street. It has been our dream home, and up until now have loved every minute. We do not want it to become a building lot. We have serious concerns about the house next door being torn down completely. First of all, our homes are not tear downs. The only reason 3194 would be considered is 8 years of total neglect. No one objects to renovations or even change in the exterior appearance, as some in the neighborhood have done. I might add very tastefully. 25 of the 33 neighbors who signed our petition objecting the proposed demolition and reconstruction of another larger house own homes built by the same builder, and all agree that these are well built, worthy of upkeep and not tear downs. The Planning Committee addressed our concerns in 2017, and we would like to commend them. All we ask for is that the present bylaws, which are in place to protect us, be enforced. The variances requested are totally unacceptable. The applicant has ignored everything in the bylaws, assuming you will approve their wish list at the end of the day. Footprint needs to be guided by current bylaws if they are allowed to demolish the present structure. Please take our concerns seriously, as we feel this is an unreasonable request. It is appalling to even consider what they call a 700 square foot increase when in fact it's closer to 800 square feet. Actually, it's 777.37 square feet. If they were not forthcoming with the people they asked to support them, 2 out of 4 people reversed their decision when they were presented with the facts, and we have their signatures to prove it. Perhaps you should check everything twice to ensure bylaws are being followed. I have chronic asthma, and the dirt and dust from the 12 months build, not to mention the stress from all the destruction and construction, is detrimental to my health. I will be unable to go outside and enjoy our deck and backyard, where I spend countless hours, because it could trigger a severe asthma attack. Also, the sun and sky will be blocked by a stone wall from 6 rooms of our house, 3 upstairs and 3 on the main floor. We take pride in our homes, inside and outside, with one exception, 3194 Shoreline Drive, our next door neighbor. Current bylaws and our elected representatives are the last line of defense before the heart of our neighborhood is ripped out in the most livable town in Oakville and Canada. They bought the smallest lot on the street, so if their wish list doesn't fit, buy a bigger lot. It is obvious our neighbors represent a strong voice in our community, so please consider a decision which will eventually affect us all. Why should my health suffer? Because our neighbor wants to ram through a non-conforming residence in one of the most unique areas in Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs. It's in your package.
Sorry, we have one more.
She didn't write down. She didn't vote.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello. My name is Doreen D'Souza,
D'Souza.
and this is my husband, David Howard.
Ms. D'Souza, what is your address?
We are both owners of 3194 Shoreline Drive.
3194.
So we've lived in Bronte for 10 years at this location. It took us over 4 years to find the location where we wanted to live in Bronte. We want to build this house to enjoy with our family and our friends and live here for a long time. It is unfortunate that some neighbors have a negative view of our plans. We understand that change is difficult, and it does make people feel uneasy. And this is exactly why we decided right in the beginning to consult with our immediate neighbors. After speaking to them, we took their concerns under consideration and made changes before we submitted our site plan in October of 2017, even though we felt that those changes were not really necessary, as explained by our planner earlier. We still do not clearly understand their objections, nor do some of the neighbors that we've spoken to. Our design essentially has the same length of adjacent walls of both immediate neighbors and also has the same width and does not negatively impact on their sunlight or their view. We also feel that we need to address a letter that was written on April 18, 2019 to the committee from the neighbor at 3196 Shoreline.
Ms. D'Souza, I didn't realize that you were going to speak to your application
Yes.
in addition to your planner. Now, you're going to be covering the same points because your planner is here to represent you, to speak to the concerns of the neighbors.
Which, yes, I'm
I
doing
just-
that.
I just need to know because
Okay.
that's just an overextension of the allotted time, and I'd like to hear from the remaining people who would like to speak
Okay.
as
I
neighbors.
just want to say one thing, that if our property was a regular shape and an average size in our area, we would not be here before the committee. We're building around a 3,000 square foot home on the water in Oakville. And how can this be considered as a monster home? We just wanted to build a home that we feel reflects our needs and our taste in design. We just want to thank you for your consideration, and I hope you will take this into consideration. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Thank you. There was another neighbor who had their hand up who would like to speak.
Respond to that
No, there is no response back and forth. It doesn't work that way here.
We have the
Next.
Go ahead, sir. Your name and address for the record,
My
please.
name is Tony Myrons. I live at 3194 Sandy Lane.
3194 Sandy Lane.
That's essentially a block north parallel to Lakeshore. Our family walks in this neighborhood on a constant basis. I don't have any statistics to provide you. Statistics are wonderful things, but they're not everything. Quantity is not, in our opinion, as important as quality. People moved into this neighborhood because of its beauty and because of the quality of life in this community. Now, I've lived in Oakville since 1944. I was away for a period of time, but my family has lived here since that time. My mother died a few years ago. I have been shocked at the change in the town. Now, the previous speaker, who is the owner of the property, made the comment that those of us who are here in opposition do not like change. That's simply not true. At least I will speak for myself. You can't stop progress, you can't stop change, but you can stop the desecration of communities. And I would respectfully suggest to this board, this committee, that you need to look at more than just statistics. I have watched over the last 40 years communities and neighborhoods in this town be changed not for the better. And it is possible to keep communities intact, to keep their unique character intact, and still have modest change. In this case, I support everything that was said by the first speaker, who is the neighbor next to this proposed build. It will change the community dramatically. So I would ask you to consider the fact that a desecration of community is not what you are about or what this town is about. And let me define desecration, and by that I mean architecturally unfit to the existing community and architecturally in conflict with existing zoning laws. We can expand the town in appropriate ways, although in parenthesis I would say what's happening north of Highway 5 is a disgrace. It's equivalent to Huddersfield and Leeds in the 19th century. But it is inappropriate, it seems to me, and I speak for myself, and I hope I speak for my neighbors, to allow this kind of build to take place because it will set a precedent which will alter the community forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Okay. Have all the neighbors who wanted to speak spoken? Because I will turn this over now to the agent. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Karen Einson, and I live at 3202 Shoreline Drive.
202?
3202.
3202 Shoreline Drive.
And we've only lived there a few years, but we've found the neighborhood to be very pleasant and, for the most part, friendly. The only thing I can say is that the house directly next to us is way bigger than our house. I mean, it's, I don't know how many feet taller, and it's at least 5,000 square feet. And it just seems, and also the next few houses, so as you look around on the very same street, there are larger homes. And I think that I understand what the neighbors are saying, and I completely understand how they feel. The only thing I can say in defense of the folks that are looking to build their home is that, you know, everybody's home is their castle, and everybody has the right, I would think, if they build within the regulations, to make their home nicer, improve it, whatever they can afford. So I'm not looking to really defend anything other than to say that there are many other houses on our street and around the corner that are quite large. And I don't really see how this house is going to be in such an opposition to the neighborhood because, again, the house next to us is absolutely huge. And I think you probably have pictures to see that. So we're just here to support the people because I feel that, you know, if it was me, I'd want some support too.
Thank you. We appreciate your submission.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Barton, the floor is yours. You have a few things to comment on, and
I'm just going to pull this back up if I could. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I have a number of comments to make. I would definitely agree with the one point that I heard about statistics aren't everything. I think what I'm hearing and what I see in the staff report is largely statistical based rather than community character based. I also see in the staff report they tried to really narrow down the area to like a 60-meter radius around the property. However, I don't have to see the petition of 30 names to know those aren't from within a 60-meter area. So if we're going to talk about the wider neighborhood being impacted, we also need to talk about the character of that wider neighborhood. So homes like these two here, the homes that we referred to on Cudmore. Yes, they are larger homes, but you can see them from these properties. If you go for a walk, you're going to be there in a few seconds. To simply push them out because a line that's drawn on a zoning map shows that they're in a different zoning designation. The point of a minor variance application is to allow that qualitative review that goes beyond the numbers. To address some of the specific concerns that were raised, even looking at this, I gladly put this house on the front of my report because I didn't think it looked like a monster house. To say that's a monster house, I've worked on monster homes. This isn't one of them. Yes, does it look different than the existing house? It doesn't mean that it isn't in the character of the existing house. It doesn't mean it's not in the character of the existing neighborhood. In terms of what solstice is, that's picked as a date because it represents the most sunlight throughout the year. However, the sunlight still, it's moving around different locations, but the point of that map was showing that the location of the house does not negatively impact how sunlight would be experienced by neighboring properties. The fact that the lot is smaller than the others in the area, again, that doesn't mean, my point earlier that you couldn't build a house in this neighborhood that met the neighborhood character and meet the zoning was exactly that. The house would be much smaller than another house that has a bigger lot. The larger lot would have a larger house that could be considered a monster home. So again, a monster home is the feel that you have, not the numbers. So if you're standing and looking at a house that's 9,000 square foot, you can't see the lot in the back. The person walking on the street doesn't have the benefit of knowing that the lot is much larger. You're still feeling that character at the street. You're still feeling that garage projection. You're still feeling all those elements. In terms of us, and I made it clear that when I talked about the area behind the property, that I knew that didn't count in zoning. It was that feel. So what I was getting at was it's mitigating negative impacts. It's mitigating the size of the lot by having that behind the property. I have seen for myself the neighbors using this green space for themselves, putting trees, putting landscaping, trying to make it a de facto extension of their property. So it does benefit them in that way as well. I do just want to address the specific items. I don't want to go through everything, so that's why I'm just taking my time, if you just benefit me. In terms of built form, they do look at what the built form policy should be. So again, in my opinion, was that it's in conformity in terms of its similar scale, height and massing and orientation. The street does have an existing angle. We calculate it to be about a 17% deflection from the street. So anything you're going to build has that as a constraint already. If you take that front garage projection and you do something with it, you can move the front of the house closer to the street and without having a projection of the garage, which would totally change the view up the street of houses to the south. They would now have the entire front of the house rather than just the projection of the garage. So again, it's trying to have that character maintained. So town staff did support the rear yard variance, so I won't go into too much detail on that. The lot coverage, again, it is over, again, what is a minor variance? I would point people to what a minor variance definition is in the Planning Act rather than a dictionary. Floor area ratio is a function of the size of the lot. Larger the lot, the larger your house can be and be within the zoning. That does not mean that the house fits in the neighborhood. Yeah. Is there any specific question? Yeah.
Mr. Bart, you spoke on a high level about the broader character area, and staff preferred a more scoped-in character area. I'd like to understand, this is an area that has, in my observation, has some very distinct singular characters. The component of shoreline in which the subject lands are located versus the more westerly component. As you go north away from the lake, the character is changed. And as a professional planner, can you reconcile the difference in the zoning categories that are applied based upon the different areas and help us understand what you're really saying about character?
So it's interesting that the staff note in their report themselves that the property is legal non-conforming today. So that means you couldn't build that house today. You couldn't build any of these houses today if you were going to meet zoning. That's the reality of it. So when you're looking at, I understand what's going on. They've looked at what is going on, lot sizes, things like that. So they try to establish a lot, a designation that applies. So when you're looking at the map, you've got the RL5 to the north because you have those bigger lots. But the actual width of that RL5 lot that backs onto the lake actually isn't much wider than the lots that go onto Shoreline Drive. As you're moving up Cudmore, the one lot, 21, is much wider, but you can see those lots, again, are getting similar in width into what you're getting back on Shoreline. So I understand if you could take a narrow view or you can take a wider view. I would suggest the town took a narrow view. So when we look at the locations of the people who supported the application, they are immediate neighborhood. There aren't 33 lots in that 60-meter radius, so you're going beyond that. So then it becomes that calculation of who's impacted, where should you draw that line? So to answer your question, as a planner, yes, you could say that there's that pocket, which in this map is really that bending area of Shoreline Drive, north and south of the road. I think when you look at the pictures that I provided in my report and the presentation here, there is that similar character, and you are getting close to those larger homes that are as the bend goes to the south. Now, the intent of that, I think it was to try and establish some kind of zoning context based on what's there today. It makes it difficult, that road bend, the open space behind, makes it very difficult to establish regular lots. You have deflected lots, you have lots that are different areas. The lot widths don't really match up with that RL3. So as I mentioned, the width of this lot today is deficient to the zoning. The area is deficient to the zoning. So then if you're going to now go and build a house that meets the zoning, it becomes a very challenging task.
As a follow-up, so there's a hierarchy of zoning in the area reflective of the lot sizes, and the RL3 is the smallest of the lots, of the lot size
No, you're seeing, well, it depends. So RL5 has narrower lots.
Yeah.
The RL2 are bigger lots, so it's kind of in that middle ground.
It's in the middle, okay.
And what we saw in our analysis was that this lot's actually closer to an RL5 in terms of the minimum lot area, minimum lot width, even though it falls in the RL3. So it does make it difficult to answer your question about what those zoning categories mean and how do you draw those lines, because you could look at that and go, well, this is an existing lot, this is a lot, this hasn't been subdivided to create this lot, or I mean, like there hasn't been a severance, this was the lot that was created. So how that zoning was applied, and I accepted the town's comment, the zoning was dropped on it, it doesn't conform today. I think it's a strong point that you couldn't build any of these houses today to reflect that. It's not a matter of buying a small lot and trying to ram a home onto it. I don't think it has that feel today, and I don't think that it would have that feel under the proposal.
Any further questions? Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barton, I don't think I'm going to argue with you that on the issue of meeting character, but I want to talk about desirability. To oversimplify it, you're taking a existing two-story box, and I say that in the sense that the first floor and the second floor is completely match, and you're replacing it with a larger two-story box with no attempt to mask the almost 800 additional square feet, and maybe even exasperating the problem by, well, again, I'll accept staff's comments. You couldn't build this existing house today. One of the variances reflects that. You cannot have a projecting garage today. But in this case, by actually removing the projecting single-story garage and increasing a mass where you don't even have that break point where you've got a single story going to a double story, so you're taking a transition away and replacing it with a larger two-story house where the ground floor and the second floor are virtually the same. So I don't want to talk about character. I want to talk about how is that desirable? When you're not doing anything to try to soften the mass of that extra 800 square feet.
So to respond to that in a couple points, the garage itself, I alluded to it earlier. If you were to get rid of the garage projection and move the house so you had no projection at all, you could have a solid face that was basically at where that solid shaded area is on the plan, all the way across the frontage of the property. So today, what I've heard from a number of the neighbors and from staff is that having that view up the street. So if you're standing south, you want to be able to look up and continue that view. So if you were to remove that projection, that triangular area to the south of the projection could be filled in. You would be looking at a wall there. The neighbor to the south would see more of a wall in that situation. And that's not desirable. I understand the reasons for not having a projection of a garage. I think in this case, the garage does provide a bit of transition as well. If you're looking at it from the front, instead of having immediately a two-story face coming right at you, you have the one story, you're moving up. They've had that architectural design to the roof line. So there has been that attention to trying to provide that visual amenity as you're moving across the property. There was also a lot of attention to maintaining the existing tree. So you would lose that if you brought the front of the house forward. So in terms of urban design policies and things like that, yes, is there always something maybe you could do to enhance? I think in the case we're trying to use the projection as a feature, trying to maintain that tree, it's trying to minimize the disruption from that existing form by providing something that is different, absolutely change. But it's not that negative impact. You're not feeling all that impact to the front. All that square footage isn't strictly just rammed into that corner that I mentioned and filled in because you can. If you were to say, well, because we can have the front right to there, 5.7 meters away, I think that would be a much more built form impact. Having some of it to the rear of the property, it's helping to soften that. You're getting more of that amenity space in that kitchen area out to the rear. So I think the attempt has been made to balance off additional floor area with maintaining the feel and the character. And there has been a lot of attention to that. I think that's where I look to staff and to the committee to hear that and understand how a garage doesn't necessarily need to be seen as a negative if it's done properly. Enhancing it, using it as a buffer, it is in a sense a step to the larger massing of the home.
Ms. Murray?
My question's simple. You cannot or you will not conform to the zoning bylaws. I don't understand.
Well, you always can. You would build a house that was much smaller than anything else in the neighborhood. And in that sense, that wouldn't fit in the character of the neighborhood either. So I understand that maybe a lot of people would say, well, I'd rather it be smaller than bigger. Again, that doesn't speak to the character. So my point was, if you want to build to the character, if this is character, the existing house, you couldn't build that under the current zoning. So you couldn't meet lot coverage or floor area, front yard, setback, all those different variances by building this house today.
And is that your opinion after having worked with the staff still?
Well, I think staff agree that the house is legal non-conforming, so that that was my point. You couldn't build the house as it sits today.
Oh, I understand
Yeah.
that. I'm talking about the new plans,
So that we couldn't make it smaller?
that you couldn't make it work with the staff, in conversations with the staff, in terms of variance 2, 4, and 5.
Yeah, and I think there is still the ongoing site plan discussion. I think what the owners had, there was a number of back and forth, and I think it comes down to building a house that they feel fits in the character and is reasonable in the neighborhood, and then accommodating staff's. So I would say they've done what they were willing to do to try and accommodate. They have changed the house, looked at the designs, looked at how they can move, and tried to stay within the zoning where they can. So like I said, not infringing on the side yards in any way, not going over the maximum height. Those are the first things I look at when you start talking about if it's a monster house, is do you need height variance? Are you going into side yard setbacks and things like that? So I would say, my opinion is this is reasonable for here. Does it need variances? Absolutely.
Any further questions before we take this matter into committee? I see none. Thank you, Mr. Barton.
Excuse me, could I respond?
It doesn't work that way. You've said your part, we've heard it. The agent has done the same. Now the matter is in committee, and we are going to have a discussion. Ms. Murray, you had a question for Mr. Hassan?
I do. I didn't receive the petition.
I'm sorry, sir, we closed the matter. I've asked everyone that was in attendance to speak, and everyone has had a chance.
You've allowed him up there twice.
Yes, that is our procedural bylaw. He presents, the neighbors speak, then he answers your concerns as well as our questions. That's how it is.
And he didn't answer your questions.
Okay, I'm not having this discussion. If you're not going to be respectful, please remove yourself.
Just as a matter of record, I've received the petition in support of. I don't seem to see the petition against, but the signatories against in my paperwork.
It's here.
That's in support of.
Oh,
No, there is
Sorry.
it's in your file, I think. Is there a discussion on this application? It's in the comments.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was in petition form. Thank you.
No. Who would like to get the ball started, and then we can have a discussion? Thank you, Ms. Murray.
Yes, Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note that the staff is in support of variances 1 and 3, and not in support of variances 2, 4, and 5. Having also taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, as well as questions and submissions from the neighbors and the public, and noting that there were written and oral objections and support, I'm prepared to make a motion for, in support of variances 1 and 3, and I will not be supporting number 2, 4, and 5.
Okay, so we usually just look at the application as a whole.
Okay.
And so we either support it as a whole.
Okay.
Or oppose it as a whole.
Okay.
Because if you nitpick at it, then we won't be able to set it.
Okay. Okay, so I can change my comments then at this time. I will not be supporting the variances at this time. And I'm prepared to make a motion to that effect.
Okay. All right, so the motion before us is to deny the application. Is there a discussion on this? Mr. Hardcastle, I see you reaching.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like my colleague, I have some reservations with respect, excuse me. I have some reservations with the requested variances. I believe that the additional size is not consistent with that within the existing established area. I think that this component of Shoreline Drive is unique with respect to its character, with regard to the size and massing of the existing buildings, the relationship of built form to the lot area, and setbacks, and I don't believe that this is a sensitive approach to a redevelopment of these lands, so I will be supporting that motion.
Hardcastle, Mr. Slawski, you have comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, like my colleagues, I will also support that motion. As I previously indicated, I don't believe that a larger massing with a reduction of the transition of that massing from the streetscape in this case is desirable.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. So with that said, the motion is to deny the application. It has failed on its merits. All those in support? Okay, the application has been denied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda tonight is 050 of 2019 at 332 Chartwell Road. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino, Gren Weiss Architect and Associates.
Good evening, Mr. Martino. Let me just canvass the room. Who is here in attendance for CAV 050 of 2019 at 332 Chartwell Road? Okay, I see none. Mr. Martino, you are aware that the town staff is not in support of the height variance, which is variance number 4. How would you like to proceed, sir? The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. If I could, I would just briefly like to go over the variances in the proposal at this time, and I will specifically speak to the height variance that is requested. The proposal is to demolish the existing dwelling, which is indicated by the dotted lines on the property. Property has been vacant and vandalized sometime. My client has just recently purchased it and wants to construct a new 2-story dwelling on the property. As a result of the design, we're seeking 4 variances tonight. I think it is safe to say that staff is in support of variance number 1 and variance number 2 and variance number 3. Variance number 1 having to do with the increased garage area, which is located in the basement, and therefore does not have an impact on the streetscape, as I think picked up in the staff comments. Variance number 2 is for the increased residential floor area, and I think staff has concluded in the report that the proposed dwelling has a mass and scale that appears similar to the dwellings in the surrounding neighborhood. It is also sympathetic and considerate of the existing dwellings on the adjacent properties with a consistent front yard setback, which speaks to variance number 3, which is the front yard setback. The zoning bylaw is written, this being Chartwell Road, Post Park is to the west of the property. The zoning bylaw is written such that the deemed front yard should be within 1 meter of the existing dwelling that legally exists on the property. And as you can see, that being this dotted line located right there, we have moved, excuse me, the proposed dwelling closer to Chartwell, and thus lining up with the residences to the north and to the south, giving a more uniform streetscape, which I believe that staff appreciates and has written in their comments. I guess with respect to height, and I've read staff's comments that they believe that there is concern that it could be out of character in the surrounding context. And therefore, they suggest in their conclusion that the first 3 meet the tests, or 1, 2, and 3 satisfy the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and they don't believe that the 4th and the height variance does. To that, a diagram. That's the front of the house. Is it possible to zoom out a bit? Okay, that's okay. We believe in terms of designing this house, the red background that you see there is almost as of right, with that limit being the maximum height limit permitted under the zoning bylaw, this being the minimum setback to the north, and this being the minimum setback to the south. We believe in the design of the house that we've purposely lowered the eaves along the side lot lines. The house actually on the site plan has greater than the required setbacks. That line indicates the minimum 4.2 setback to the north. We're approximately 6 meters at that side. This line here indicates the minimum 4.2. We're approximately 4.6. So we have additional and greater side yard setbacks. This diagram attempts to illustrate that almost as of right, you could come out to the maximum side yard setbacks to the maximum height in a flat roof design, and we've purposely attempted to slope the roof down to the side lot lines, and the shaded area there indicates in the center of the lot the additional height, which is 4 feet over. So therefore, the peak of the 4 feet over in the variance sought tonight is approximately ends up 30 feet or 9 meters from the side lot line to the north, and 24 feet, about 7.2 meters or 7 meters from the south lot line. I guess in comments with respect to meeting the official plan with respect to the height variance, and I guess under 11.1.9 of the official plan, development within the stable residential neighborhood shall maintain and protect the existing neighborhood character, which would be my submission that we do. And that specifically staff has said that the built form and development, including the scale, height, massing, architectural character, and materials to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. It's my submission to you that it is compatible. I think the test in the definition under the OP of compatibility means the development or redevelopment uses may not necessarily be the same or similar to the existing development, but can coexist without unacceptable adverse impacts. It'd be my submission that there are no adverse impacts, and I'm trying to wrap up here for you, that there is no one here to speak to the proposal tonight. There is no evidence that there are adverse impacts. I can
We have
relate to...
2 letters of support and 1 letter of opposition, actually.
Yes, I have an additional letter of support of the neighbor to the south, if I may give them to the Committee of Adjustment. It's from Mr. Rene Monero.
Are there any questions of Mr. Martino at this time? No? Okay. And there was no one here to speak to it, so...
Yeah. I can tell the committee that I have spoken at length a number of times, most recently today with the neighbor to the north. They have no concerns. They would like a mulberry tree taken down in the backyard of the property, which I committed to. They have some kind of issues with their pool and the maintenance of it being the tree that it is. I guess finally what I would say, the last comment, and I'm sorry, Madam Chair, for taking so much of your time, that with respect to the driveway comment, it's almost a condition of the variance. We're proposing only one access from Chartwell, so it's actually not a circular drive as defined by the zoning bylaw. And I think the hammerhead quote, which is being talked about here, this is actually done in turf paving. So it would be landscaped. It would look like grass. It's just that you can drive on it. And I would suggest, and I've come prepared tonight, I'm not sure if the committee would indulge me, but there are... This is immediately the surrounding neighborhood, all of which have hammerheads and or circular driveways all the way down Chartwood. And I think committee, knowing that you do the site visits, would agree with me that Chartwell is a kind of particular, Chartwell Road is a kind of particular neighborhood and a unique neighborhood which the OP is attempting to recognize in its special area and reinforce that this is in fact the character of the neighborhood, is that they do have circular drives and that they do have hammerheads for parking and that there are gated residences. And that's a perspective of the front of the house in which you can see that the roofs are attempting to go towards the center of the lot and away from the adjacent properties. I guess I would say that the site is bordered by 35-foot high spruce trees on all. That's not even showing up anymore.
It's showing now. He fixed it.
And with respect to height, I would suggest to you that's a neighbor, which is about 4 properties south, that this is actually the unique character of Chartwell, which the OP is saying that we're supposed to protect. And it speaks, I would suggest to you again, the compatibility of our proposal with, these are all pictures of surrounding residences, all of which are defined as having steeper roofs sloped back towards the center of the properties with unusually tall heights. This one particular, this is just from an architect's point of view, what we're trying to avoid is that as a result of the current height bylaw, what you end up with in a lot of locations is the roof goes up to a certain point, tries to be a gable roof or a hip roof, and it's cut off and it ends up looking like a mansard. So we're attempting to try to create something which is more in keeping with the neighborhood of having some sloped roofs. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very well. Are there, Mr. Tlowski, go ahead.
With respect to the hammerhead, is it your request of the committee that if your application were approved, that they not impose that condition?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it would be, sir. I guess it's also important to note that we are not seeking a variance for the driveway. It's as of right, we could build it. I understand that staff doesn't like it. I understand the comment with respect to the OP about where it says surface parking shall be minimized. We're only providing 2 spaces, and again, it's turf block paving. I think from any idea of the front, also considering the heavy and mature trees in the front, that it would look like a landscaped area, so I don't believe it would look like paving.
Ms. Rivera, you had a question about it. Was it answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions before we take this matter into committee? Okay, see none. We will do so. Is that okay? You're ready for us to take it into committee?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Tlowski. I see you reaching.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have to commend Mr. Martino for his presentation tonight. I think this really showed, for me anyway, why we do site visits and why we actually have these hearings. I thought his presentation was excellent in explaining the choice in the massing that was used which resulted in a larger height variance, and showing that the hammerhead is in fact, in quote his words, it is the character of this neighborhood. So, Madam Chair, I would note that there's 3 letters in support of this variance, 1 letter in opposition, but I would note that the letter of opposition provides no information with respect to what the impacts of the variances are, just opposes the fact that there are variances being requested. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this application be approved as applied for, find that it does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and I would just make that approval subject to the 2 standard conditions, that a building permit issue within 2 years and that development proceed in general accordance with the drawings. I do believe that this meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and that the condition on the alteration of the driveway is not required.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Tlowski. A regular one, the building permit, and then general accordance with the drawings as submitted. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay. Okay. Application CAV 051 of 2019 at 1220 Lakeshore Road. Good evening.
That's not my file. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Paul Demchek with Batory Urban Planning and Management, here as a planner on behalf of the applicant.
Very well. Who is here for application CAV 051 of 2019 at 1220 Lakeshore Road West? Anyone here for this application? Okay, I see none. Go ahead, Mr. Demchek. You will have to speak to your application, as seeing as staff is not in support of your driveway or height variance. So.
Yes, so for the benefit of the committee, I hate doing this, but I've got revised plans that I would like to distribute to the committee with changes to both the height and the driveway width requests. Just for note to the committee, both of these variances have been reviewed by planning staff.
Okay.
Brandon has a copy of the drawings as well for his benefit, and planning staff has indicated support to us, and I believe they'll be able to speak on this matter as well.
Okay. He'll take us through them. Thanks.
So again, for the benefit of the committee, you have reviewed the existing plans to date, which showed a 12-meter height and a driveway width of approximately 28 meters originally. I will note that the revised drawings that are before you right now, those are the only two changes to those plans, and nothing else has been revised on those plans.
So the maximum height now is at 11 meters instead of the requested 12.
That's correct.
And then the driveway width is
18 meters.
is 18 meters instead of the requested 29. Okay. So Jasmine, are you making those changes on the, okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Demchek? Go ahead, Ms. Mary.
Respectfully, if you were able to change the height, could you not change it to comply?
Without significantly impacting the intended architecture of the dwelling, no, we would not be able to. And what we've demonstrated in both the planning justification report that I've submitted before the committee, as well as to planning staff, is that what we've done is allocated significant setbacks from the side property line to not only the side of the dwelling, but also setbacks to the, I'll call it the 11-meter portion of the dwelling, which ranges between 16 to upwards of 20 meters of side yard setbacks to that element of the design. So in my opinion, we've designed a dwelling that is very carefully respectful of the character and impacts to neighboring residents.
Any further questions?
Support the revised application?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. After the pre-consultation meeting with the agent and urban design staff and zoning staff last week, we met on an offsite meeting to discuss the comments and review the revised plans that are in full support of the modified application as applied for. If the committee chooses to approve the application, we would just request that the 2 standard conditions be included as part of the approval, noting that site plan approval is subject to this property as well.
And then the revised plans of April 23rd, which were submitted today. Okay. Mr. Demchuk, if you have nothing further to add, we can take the matter into committee.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Hardcastle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first comment is on procedure. I really, really, really do not like to see new plans come in front of me here. I don't want to speak for the entirety of the committee, but having the opportunity to review the totality of the variances on site while we do our site inspections is really important, and this kind of devalues that component of our process. And I encourage applicants and staff to consider that before this happens. That being said, in this specific circumstance with the modifications, as modest as they are, if you will, in terms of the reading of the drawings, I'm prepared to put forward a motion at this point in time with that reservation noted for the record. Having reviewed the plans, the revised plans, and read the staff report and heard the additional comments from the applicant as well as staff, I'll put forward a motion of approval. The revisions to the height and given the built form and the stepping of the wings, if you will, of the building and centering of the mass, given the large size of the lot and the general character in the area, I think is supportable. It's fairly consistent with the character in the area, and I think the reductions with respect to the size and extent of hard surface area is also supportable. So I will put forward a motion of approval for the variances as modified, subject to our two standard conditions. Those being general accordance with the revised drawings as submitted, and the expiration of the approval in 2 years should a permit not be issued.
Thank you, Mr. Chalowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Your application has been approved. Application CAV of 052 of 2019 at 314 Pine Avenue. Good evening.
Evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Pontiso. I am the applicant and the owner at 314 Pine Avenue.
Good evening, Mr. Pontiso. Who is here in attendance for application CAV 052 of 2019 at 314 Pine Avenue? I see none. Okay. Mr. Pontiso, this is your time to speak to the committee. We've done our site visits. We are aware of your application for the second-story addition and the attached garage and covered porch. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the committee further to this, or anything you'd like to add?
I've read the comments from staff regarding my application. I have no further comments or questions about what was said, but I'm happy to further discuss them here tonight if there's any other questions.
Very well. Are there any questions of Mr. Pontiso at this time? I see none. So if we're ready to take this matter into committee, are you satisfied we can do so?
Yes.
Okay. Who is ready to move a motion? Ms. Murray, go ahead.
Sure. Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, which I note is in support of the minor variances. I'm prepared to make a motion in support of minor variances 1 and 2, subject to the following conditions: that the addition, attached garage and covered porch be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated March 6, 2019, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Application has been approved.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
Application CAV 053 of 2019 at 283 Allen Street. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Osman Khosravi from Carey Engineering, 603 Argus Road, Unit 207 in Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Khosravi. Who is here in attendance for application 053 of 2019 at 283 Allen Street? Okay, I see none. Mr. Khosravi, we are aware of your application for the rear addition at the main level on the accessory structure. Is there anything further that you'd like to add about your application?
Well, two items perhaps. Number one, my client shared with me and support of the three immediate neighbor, one to the side and one in the back, immediately impacted, which are all in favor of that application, which I shared already with the committee this morning. Unfortunately, I received it very late.
Yes, they were in the late comments, yes.
And as well as I shared with planning, there is a slight change actually from the application, which will not concern the minor variances or the number of the variances that we have, is the fact that the owner decided to go with a full basement as opposed to what it was proposed initially, which was a crawl space. As a result of that, we have a window to the north, which I shared this afternoon with Brandon, and that's the only change that you will notice when I go for permit with respect to what you have in your hand.
Okay, so when we approve our applications, we usually approve them in terms of plans as submitted.
Great.
So how is that going to affect your submission?
As I mentioned, it's very insignificant, if you wish. It's what was proposed. It was a crawl space initially, and now it's turned to a full basement. So it will not cause any further variance, obviously. The outlook is completely the same, with the exception of a window that is added to the north. That's pretty much it. I can present it if you wish to.
Can you show us?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And planning staff is aware of this and they're fine?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, we've seen the plans, and more or less it's just the labeling of the crawl space versus the basement.
Okay, so
Great, yeah.
you're okay with that, or you need the new set of plans to be submitted to you?
Okay, the only elevation that is actually impacted is the elevation to the north. This is what you see here. So this window is what you didn't have on the original application. The rest is pretty much the same.
Well, if we do approve this application as it is, you will have to submit this elevation to the Secretary Treasurer.
Of course.
Are there any question of Mr. Khosravi at this time? You see none? I see none. Okay. Thank you for your submission. We're ready to take this matter into committee.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Tlowski, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm satisfied this application meets the 4 tests of Planning Act, finding to be very minor in nature. And I would move approval of the application, subject to 2 conditions: that a building permit issue within 2 years, and that development proceed in general accordance with the drawings provided to the committee, with the addition of the revised north elevation that was presented to the committee tonight. And I would note that there were letters of support from the local community.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Tlowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Your application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Application CAV 055 of 2019 at 2537 Northridge Trail.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Rosenblum, residing at 11 Glazeport Avenue, and just here to discuss the minor variance for the pool that my client would like to install.
Sorry, can you repeat your last name again?
Yes, it's Matthew Rosenblum.
Rosenblum.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Rosenblum. Is there anybody here who's in attendance for CAV 055 of 2019 at 2537 Northridge Trail? See none. Okay, Mr. Rosenblum, we're aware of your application and for the setback for the swimming pool. You don't have a gas pipelines in the rear, do you? So
No.
that's not something that's affecting you. Okay.
No.
Are there any questions of Mr. Rosenblum at this time? I see none. If you're ready for us to take this matter into committee, you have nothing further to add, we can do that.
No, thank you. That's
Okay.
great. Go ahead.
Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the materials, including the staff report, and undertaking my site visit, I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the floor test, and that the construction of a swimming pool within the flankage lot line will not result in negative impacts upon the adjacent community. So I'll put forward a motion of approval, and that motion would be subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed pool be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated June 18th, 2018, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
So now we're on Watson, right? Yes. Okay. All right. Application CAV 056 of 2019 at 125 Watson Avenue.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. Your name and address for the record, please.
Eric Canton from Virtual Creations, 17 King Street East in Dundas.
Mr. Canton, give me a moment, please. I'd like a show of hands for everyone here in attendance for CAV 056 of 2019 at 125 Watson Avenue. Okay. So, who would like to speak to the committee? I'd like a show of hands for the people who would like to speak to the committee so that I can call on you in an efficient and timely manner. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right, Mr. Canton, take us through your application, and then we will invite the members of the public neighbors to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm going to be quick, because I imagine the discussion afterwards is going to be longer. So we're asking for two variances, which we worked very hard at with staff to present only two variances. So the first is for height. Now, what I would like to community to appreciate on the height is that the building face is not where the increase in height is happening. The increase in height is happening in the difference in grade from the front property to the foundation. And that was a request from our grading engineer in order to better the grading plan and the storm water. So I have a diagram. It's a little difficult to articulate, but essentially, if the land from the Watson up towards the back is relatively flat, we would comply with the 9 meters. But it was requested that the grade difference between the road and the house and at the back be greater to deal with the drainage pattern. Oh, sorry. So, so this is what it would look like if the property was, if the grading was a little bit flatter. So we haven't changed the building. What has happened is that the difference in grade from the front property to the foundation is increased so that we have better drainage patterns happening. And again, that came as a request from the engineers. The second variance is for coverage. And so while 24 is greater than 19, the average in the neighborhood is closer to 25. So I think for those two reasons, that's why staff is in support and why I feel like the design is a good design, it's appropriate, and the variances are minor in nature.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Canton. Are there any questions of Mr. Canton at this time? I see none. Thank you. We will just ask them, your neighbors, to speak, and then we'll have you back up here.
Thank you.
Okay, who would like to come down first? Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and the committee. My name is Sarah Gillians, and I reside at 121 Watson Avenue in Oakville. For the record, would like to show you a picture of my residence and the stream that is going through our front yard. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of vegetation and a stream that goes down to the lake in our front yard. The severance of this property was the subject of mediation discussions with the town and ourselves in July of 2016. At the time of the severance, the issue of future minor variances was not permitted to be discussed, as there was no joint application for variances. Our concern was that this lot was created smaller than the others on the subject property. And the subject property at the time was 135 Watson, not 125. So would like to make sure that that is noted for the record. And the surrounding existing lots, which could lead to possible future requests for future variances to coverage. The zoning regulations for this area are necessary to preserve the existing vegetation and, more importantly, to recognize the lack of full urban services in this area. These were not serviced lots. This was a severance. The major concern is that there's no comprehensive stormwater system, and the existing system depends upon overland flow through private properties, such as my own. With respect to the 4 tests of Section 45(1) of the Planning Act, we would respectfully submit that the determination of minor in nature is not a quantity consideration, but a quality function deliberation. In this instance, the 19% coverage requirement in the zoning bylaw is critical to the preservation of the existing vegetation and in recognition of the lack of urban services, especially the unique stormwater system in the area, where additional water flow will traverse private properties such as my own and of the Selbys. The main test in this circumstance is whether the variances are desirable for the appropriate development use of the land. We are not arguing the roof height or the character of this building at all. It is the footprint that we're concerned about. It is our respectful submission that this variance request is in effect an application to amend the zoning bylaw to a more urban standard of coverage, where full urban services are available and there is less concern for existing vegetation. In this instance, the general intent of the zoning bylaw is to reflect the circumstances related to the lack of full urban services and significant vegetation in the area. Therefore, this variance on a smaller lot has significant impact on these two matters. The general intent of the official plan is to protect significant vegetation and to ensure that services such as stormwater are carefully planned so as to not affect adjoining properties. There were ongoing studies at the time of July 2016 regarding our unique stormwater system. In fact, we had Phil Kelly come and look at the property, and he was not aware of the situation at the time. Given the overland flow, depending upon flow over private properties, we would like to receive the staff comments from the town engineering department, as was promised in the July 2016 letter from Mark Simeone and as well as others. 5% variance matters. It matters because it increases flow onto our property. We've already had significant flooding, and as you can see, we have a stream going through our front yard. Now, we did get a stormwater management plan yesterday. It was for 135 Watson, not 125, noted from January 2019. Our engineer, Stephen Frankovich from Llewellyn and Associates, reviewed this. And he indicated, although the rationale provided by the engineer is in keeping with industry standards, there were a number of questions that he had. Has an in situ percolation test been conducted on the site? The level of imperviousness seems lower than what we calculated, 28.79% versus 35.8%. The higher the impervious percentage, the more runoff. The location of the infiltration gallery at the front of the property, adjacent to my property, interferes with the root system of a property line tree. This was not taken into account. We would also recommend a factor of safety be added to account for any additional hard surface features and for future clogging, and this was not taken into account. We would respectfully ask that the letter of July 2016, that we are allowed peer review of such things as the drainage system, as well as the site plan and stormwater management, as was promised to us. Otherwise, it would be a misrepresentation by the town. Thank you.
Okay, so, Ms. Gillian, we do have your letter on hand, and I appreciate your submission. You are aware that this property will be subject to site plan, so all of these issues that you're worried about, and rightfully so, are going to be dealt with under that purview.
And what I'm trying to convey is that these two are not parallel, that an increase in the footprint by 5% impacts all of the stormwater management, the drainage, the vegetation, and everything that's been indicated in the stormwater management plan was to industry standards.
You don't have any proof that as per the drawings, that this would affect the water table in that way? You're just worried that it would?
No, I have a professional engineer on retainer, Stephen Frankovich.
Okay. And
as well as an urban planner, Don May.
Okay, and their reports are where?
I'm happy to send you. They were instructed that they would be given by staff the opportunity to peer review the stormwater management and the drainage plan, and those were not provided to us by the town.
But you will have that opportunity during site plan.
And so we were given the stormwater management plan by the neighbors, and we had the professional engineer review them, and there were inconsistencies with what was indicated and what his advice would be.
Okay, Mr. Hassan, care to comment on the situation with the site planning and the peer review?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right in terms of your comments at the beginning of the meeting. That process is currently ongoing. My understanding is that the severance, obviously subject to site plan control at this point in time, is undergoing its second review of submission. The letter dated from July speaks to comments and documentation that would be provided through the site plan committee review process. It has not gone to the site plan committee as of yet because staff are still working with the applicant to ensure that the drainage and grading, stormwater management impacts are mitigated or eliminated through that review. The variances themselves directly impact the functionality of the site, but to a degree, if the drainage and grading patterns change the plans in any way and variances change, then the applicant would be required to come back and amend those plans. But to this point in time, through discussions with engineering staff, the variances won't be impacted by the review of the drainage and grading and the technical aspects of site plan at this time.
Okay, and this property falls under the new DESP, which is the development.
Well, through Madam Chair, since it was created by way of consent, it's a full-blown site plan approval application, whereas the zero suffix zone would trigger the DESP, Development Engineering Site Plan Review process.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Tlowski, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for staff. From the comments that the neighbors have made so far tonight, there seems to be a concern that the neighbors were promised reports and the town didn't follow through on that promise. From my read of Mr. Lambert and Simeone's letter, all the promises, for lack of a better word, of information and opportunity to review were related to the site plan approval process, not the variance process we're in tonight. And granted, there's always that chicken and egg scenario. One has to come first. But from your perspective, the town has not reneged on its promise to the community. That process just hasn't followed through to its conclusion yet. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that'd be correct.
Any further questions? Okay, Ms. Gillen, thank you for your submission. Who is next? Good evening.
Hello, my name is Hilary Selby. I live at 117 Watson Avenue. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for allowing me to address the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Selby. Go ahead.
And my motive for being here tonight is to try and prevent the town getting into trouble. Also to try and prevent the owner getting into delays, and also to try and satisfy ourselves as residents who are a group who, 2 years ago, wanted to take this particular application to the OMB. And the town came to us and asked us not to go because it would save money. And so we put together and we sat with the solicitor, the assistant solicitor, if you note he's on this Deferral. And basically we were told we would be given reports. And I know you can argue when it's site plan or whatever, but there was a commitment that we would see information. There would be an open transparency. And I'd just like to quote what you, Honourable John Hardcastle, said tonight, that there is a comment on procedure. And if you see the procedure as not transparent, it does devalue confidence in the process. We have spent time, effort, and integrity in just trying to get the information. And we're sort of feeling there is a breach of trust here in legality. There is a misrepresentation to taxpayers to stop us going to the OMB, so it saved some money for the town. And the town has not done due diligence in terms of compliance with the process. And that is what I and this group would submit. And we will take it as far as we can. If you want to have a deferral, we'll pay the fee. But all we're asking for is information and transparency. Thank you very much.
Ms. Selby, I'll just make a comment with respect to what Mr. Talowski and Mr. Hassan confirmed just moments ago, that this is the second round of site plan that is going to be undertaken for this property, and that you will all have an opportunity to participate in that. It is an ongoing process. So
But could I just add to that you changed the variables? We agreed as we were presented with what was the lots and so on, and it's changed the variables. So in the interest of due diligence and transparency, I would like to see that information now. Is that such a big deal to wait to the next variance committee a month?
Oh, no, they won't come back to variance unless the variances need to be changed.
But we were only given 2 weeks' notice for this over Easter. So there's this an element
and that's
of a
within,
push
and
here.
that's within the actual bylaw. You do get the 2-week notice.
Yeah, but in the
procedures were
interest of
followed
the
correctly,
process.
so it's no different for you and anybody else going through a variance application. That is the time frame that we are prescribed.
But we have been misrepresented to by the town. That would be our legal argument. Thank you.
Any questions at this time? Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I saw 3 hands. Yes, the gentleman on the left. Good evening.
Good evening. Dwayne Chung. I live at 417 Lakeshore Road East, which is fairly close by. I've been listening, so I kind of get a feel of, I think, where the direction is going, that the discussion will be probably put off to the site planning. I simply would make the point that if Ms. Gilliam is so motivated to have retained an engineer, what harm could it do to allow that engineer to participate in the discussion and perhaps provide you with information of how the variance, which is under question right now, could potentially have an impact on flow, since water flow onto Ms. Gilliam's property, as that was the original intent, I believe, of the discussion, which was achieved in 2016. So, you know, what harm can it do to have a little extra information available to you to make your decision? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to clarify to everyone in attendance today that these processes are very usually done in tandem. And when we look at the material that's presented before us as an application, it's a comprehensive application that everyone in town staff has commented on, be it engineering, development, at times it's conservation halt, and there's a lot of work that goes into these applications and the reports that we rely on to make our decision. And if they have the confidence that we can make a decision based on the information that is given to us, then we have to trust that confidence. And in the chances that there are missing information, that our decision-making capacity can be hindered, they will let us know of that fact. So at this present time, the application before us with the minor variances as they are before us right now, we feel confident that we can speak to this application without having to wait for an engineering weigh-in. But certainly you'll have that capacity to do that, again, in the site planning process. And if things change, as Mr. Hassan clearly indicated and gave us the confidence in that, then it will have to come back and seek further variances. And that's why we have a stipulation of the 2 years and the building permit being issued, because all these things happen at the same time. Instead of holding one process until hostage, so to speak, until the other one is completed, it just makes the flow easier. And if we need to circle back around, then we will do that. So I just want everyone to have that confidence in the process, and that town staff will get the information to you that you have been looking for. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else before I close it to the public and allow Mr. Canton to respond? Okay, so it's now closed. Mr. Canton, the floor is yours. You're to answer the issues that neighbors had, and then the committee might have some questions for you.
Yes. So back to the principal question, that is of coverage and how potentially coverage could affect things like drainage. So one aspect to appreciate is that the house is quite a bit deeper than it is wider. So the side yard, the distance from the side yards is quite large, which is, again, part of the discussion that we've had with staff and with our engineering and stormwater engineers to address the drainage pattern. But the coverage, the aspect of coverage from a planning perspective is that it's in keeping with the neighborhood, a relative size to all the other homes, and it's not as wide as it could be. So from a streetscape and from a built form, it's not overpowering. And we're also not asking for a variance on the lot to floor ratio, which is another critical component to addressing mass. Obviously, a lot has to do with the grading, with drainage, and with the site plan process. So the owners just instructed me that we are more than happy to be open with the current neighbors that are here to share with them any of the documents that we've prepared and submitted to town staff, as well as staff's full site plan report that they've given back to us for their first review.
Very well, that shows goodwill on your part. I'm glad to hear that. Are there any questions of Mr. Kenton at this time? I see none. If you are ready for us to take this matter into committee, then we will do so. You're familiar with the conditions that staff have recommended.
Yes.
Okay. Who would like to move a motion, or start the discussion at least? Okay. Ms. Murray.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note is in support of the minor variances. Also having taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, as well as questions and submissions from the public, and noting that there were written and oral objections and support, I'm prepared to make a motion in support of to approve the variances, subject to the following conditions. That the dwelling be built in accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction, and in cases where a building permit is not required, that the proposed scope of work has not been fully completed.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
I would just note here that we have heard from staff with respect to the process, and it appears that the written staff report, as well as the comments from staff, as well as our chair, supports the position that was taken by the Director of Planning in the correspondence that were attached, dated from July of 2016, in that the site plan process is ongoing, and that the grading, drainage, site servicing plans would be provided as part of that process prior to the consideration by the site plan committee. So I'm satisfied with the variances for the reasons stated, but also that the historic process that's been laid out by the town continues to be on the table, and a commitment by the town to address those requirements in accordance with those timelines. So I will be supporting the motion that's on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any further discussion? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, there was no support. It's all opposition. Good evening. Application CAV 057 of 2019 at 169 Sibella Drive. Who is here for this application, CAV 057 of 2019 at 169 Sibella Drive? Okay, I see none. Good evening. Your name and address for the record?
Jonathan Sprosson with DQI at 451 Drummond Road, Oakville.
Sorry, Sprassa?
Sprosson, S-P-R-A-W-S-O-N.
Sprosson. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Sprosson. This is in addition to an existing dwelling, and we have variance for the flankage yard. Okay, we are familiar with the application. We are at your disposal. If you have anything further to add.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. It's just a simple thing in that when I first went to the site and saw it myself, I thought it was very unusual that the garage was only about 2.5 feet from the fence. And I thought it must have been because of road widening or something like that, that the fence would be so close. But then when we got the survey done, it's because the fence isn't on the property line. So there was a variance for the garage a number of years ago, and we would like to just keep that for the new section of the building and come out in front of the garage slightly so that it's a tandem, not a double garage that we could put on the other side. It would affect the neighbors considerably if we move something to the other side, and we'd be going for other variances. So the thing I just wanted to make sure that I know everybody went to the site, I'm sure today, is that the fence is about 3 feet or 3.5 feet into the property line at the front and even more at the back. And the rear property line is about 10 feet from the actual the fence is about 10 feet from the property line. So it gives you a bit of a perspective. When we're finished, hopefully the fence will move to the property line and it'll look a little more reasonable. I just wanted everybody to know that because it looked funny to me when I was at the site.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions of Mr. Sprossen at this time? Mr. Talowski. Okay, you wanted to make a motion. If you're satisfied, we're ready to take this matter into committee. Okay, the floor is yours, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you. Sorry for jumping the gun there. Madam Chair, I'm satisfied this application meets the 4 tests of Planning Act. What we're dealing with here is basically an extension to an existing situation. I would move this application be approved as applied for, subject to the development proceeding, general accordance with the drawings provided dated March 25th, and that a permit issue within 2 years. And I would note that there is no opposition from the community. And 1 letter of support.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Application CAV 058 of 2019 at 183 Westdale Road. Good evening.
Good evening. Members of the committee, Secretary Treasurer, Madam Chair. My name is Richard Mann. I'm the architect for the owners of 183 Westdale Road.
Very well,
Yep.
thank you, Mr. Mann. Just give me a moment to canvass the room. Who is here in attendance for CAV 058 of 2019 at 183 Westdale Road? Okay, I see none. All right, the floor is yours, Mr. Mann.
Thank you. The application before you today, as applied for, had 5 variances. Through you, Madam Chair, I would submit that we'd like to drop variance number 5, the inclusion of the balcony from the application. We'll no longer be seeking that variance.
Okay.
I do have a handout here. That.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just collecting my stuff. So of the 4 remaining variances that we're requesting, the first one is the garage floor area. The garage floor area that we're requesting is 68.2 meters, where 56 meters is allowed. That extra floor area we've incorporated within the envelope of the building. The garage face for the house is still a 2-car garage. The extra space is in tandem. We feel that this is in keeping with the neighborhood. It's a minor variance in nature and is worthy of your consideration. Variance number 2 is for the interior side yard. We're requesting 2.82 meters, where 4.2 meters is allowed. Now, I want to be clear, the request for this variance has nothing to do with the size of the house. The house as designed could fit on the appropriate lot. It could fit within the width of the parameters on this lot. The lot is a parallelogram. And there are 2 issues. If we, what ended up happening is we designed the house based on the width of the lot so that it would fit. We put the house on the lot when we were laying out the site, and it brought to question, is there a better way to do it? Or is there another way to do it? Because the 2 issues that it creates with the orientation of it, A, is it's a disproportionate sort of equality between the rear yard and the front yard. It also has an effect on the driveway orientation, and as it's directly related to the hydro pole that's on the street. So I'll deal with the yard. Let's see if I can get this a little closer, or if you can zoom out a little, or I'll go from one to another. Yep, there you go, perfect, thank you. So this particular layout here shows it in parallel with the property lines. We meet the corner, we meet the back, we meet the sides. The difference is that you see the disproportionate sort of distance at the front yard in relation to the existing house to the south, and then also how compressed the rear yard is at that point. This yard is also impacted by the fact that the grade raises to the back. There is a stone retaining wall that surrounds the pool, and that rear yard is also, it's impacted by that. There is less usable area, flat area for the rear yard in that position. So what we did is when we laid it out, we said, okay, is there a different way that we could potentially do it? You drive down Westdale, you see varying orientations on the street. Some are parallel to the lot, some are perpendicular to the street. There are also many houses that are kind of what I'll call tweeners. They're in between. And that's actually the orientation of the existing property on the existing house on this property. It's in between. And there's a reason for that. What it tends to do is if we orient the house to the same orientation as the existing property, it pulls the front of the house a little bit closer to the street, and it provides us with a little bit more clearance in the rear yard. It makes a more uniform front yard for the on the streetscape. The other thing it does is it allows us to keep the garage in the similar position, similar orientation that it exists now. It allows us to keep the driveway access in a similar position to what it is now. If we use the one on the left where it's where it meets the zoning bylaw, the driveway is now more central in the property, is covering more of the middle of the property, and the clearance to the light post is very minimal. It's less than a foot to the edge of the driveway by the time we hit the property line and come back to the street. Both of those elements, in our mind, were not desirable in the sense of how this property gets redeveloped. So then the question would be, if we are going to spin the house slightly, it now obviously creates additional width, and that's the additional width that we're requesting. And then, therefore, it asks the question is then where do you find that width? At what place do you put it so that it's the least impactful on the neighborhood and on the property? So we've basically chosen the front or the northwest corner of the property as the least impactful, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is on the elevations, or on the 3D, you can see that is the largest area of single-story roof on the site. So it's a lower roofed area, very similar to what actually exists there now. I'll also point out that the location of the corner that we're proposing is set back further by 0.4 of a meter than the existing house. So it's not creating a scenario at that point that is worse than exists now. The other factor is the separation between dwellings, which is something to take into consideration if you're requesting a variance to side yard setbacks. So the separation between dwellings in this point here is 8.71 meters. Now, I know that's fortunate on our part because we have it from the neighboring property because it's further away. But the fact of the matter is that the physical presence of the house on the street is going to be maintaining that 8.71 separation between the dwellings. That area is also extremely well treed. It's very well screened by the existing vegetation at that point. And then the other impact of moving the dwelling to the side is that, again, the dwelling is designed to meet the appropriate width. So whether or not the dwelling is centered on the property or whether or not we have it the way we're proposing it, the impact on the street visually is going to be the same. So in this particular instance, we feel that there are enough factors involved that make the siting that we're proposing of the 2.82 meters as an appropriate siting for the property in this location. My clients have spoken to both the neighbors to the north and the south. Neither of them have an issue with any of the variances. I think there's a letter in your it's in the package I gave you and also was submitted this morning. So that's the side yard, the interior side yard. The next two variances, the last two, and they have to do with floor area ratio and lot coverage. Those speak to scale and massing. The lot coverage, as you know, is comprised of the garage area, the ground floor area, and covered porches. Single-story covered porches add to architectural character of houses and are an excellent tool, an excellent design tool in breaking up building mass and scale. In this particular design, single-story covered porches account for 16.6% of the allowable lot coverage. Our total lot coverage that we're proposing exceeds the allowable lot coverage by 1.1%. I would argue that taken in context of the design, the 1.1% extra lot coverage is minor in nature. Now, in order to mitigate the overall scale and massing of the design of the house, we've taken steps architecturally and from a design perspective to break down the scale of the house and the mass. The front wall is stepped back significantly in the middle. The front wall on the second floor is stepped back from the ground floor, allows for a horizontal roof line that covers a covered porch. There's an introduction of dormers and bay windows, which again breaks down the facade of the house, and all of those elements help to mitigate the overall size. The house height meets the zoning bylaw. The side yard roof lines are all hipped roofs, so there are no tall gables on that side. And, you know, the idea is breaking down the roof line so that we can bring the house down to the ground easier, so that we don't have a two-story mass on the front facade of the house. There are many two-story dwellings in the neighborhood. The package I gave you is just an example of properties just on Westdale. There are many two-story dwellings along on Westdale Road, and there are examples of homes that have been approved that exceed the allowable floor area ratio, and one that exceeds the lot coverage, and it has a far bigger lot. And at 183 Westdale, we feel that architectural elements and materials have been used to create a design that's unique in the area. It adds diversity, and it's compatible with the character of the neighborhood. We feel the variants requested are minor in nature. They meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act and are worthy of your consideration. And as I said, my clients have spoken with the neighbors on either side and across the street, and there is no one here in opposition. And the neighbors immediately to the north and south have written their letters of recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Are there any questions of Mr. Mann at this time? I see none. Okay, so we will take this matter into committee. Do you have questions?
They say pictures worth 1,000 words. The pictures that the applicants provided to the committee would seem to suggest that this, despite what you said in the staff report, that this house is very much in keeping with the character of the existing neighborhood, and in many cases from some of these drawings actually a more sensitive design than what exists. Can you help me with why staff feel that this house is out of character with the neighborhood?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, in consultation with urban design staff, although these 3D renderings do help visually represent how the building is designed in terms of the single-story elements, the large open to below space, which is contained within the center of the dwelling, pushes the mass to the perimeter of the building. And in regards to the massing, in that aspect, that's where staff was coming from in terms of the scale in relation to other adjacent dwellings in the area.
Mr. Hardcastle, you had a question?
So just another question to staff going off that. So really, you'd be, urban design staff would be seeking to see that open to below space sort of externalized, if you will, so that the second story is kind of pulled in towards the center to provide further transition to the north and south.
Through you, Madam Chair, that would be correct.
Okay, Mr. Mann, if you're satisfied, we will take this matter into committee.
Thank you.
Who would like to move a motion? Mr. Hardcastle, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Mr. Tulowski said, pictures are worth 1,000 words. I was going over my notes from my site visit, and I recall having spent a significant amount of time going up and down Westdale, just trying to get a feel for what we were seeing and understanding the relationship of lot area, lot size to the buildings, that the newly constructed buildings. And my conclusion and my position following a very good presentation is that, and the elimination of the one variance, the fifth variance, is that the requested variances are consistent with the character that's there. I will put forward a motion of approval for the 4 variances that remain. I am, excuse me, I am satisfied that the design of the building works to minimize the mass, the additional mass that's being sought, and that there's a thoughtful consideration of the placement of the building with respect to the reduced side yard, and that the building ultimately will be in keeping with the character that's being established through the new built form. So as I said, I'll put forward a motion of approval, and that motion would be subject to 2 conditions. The conditions being that it be in general accordance with the submitted drawings modified to eliminate the second floor balcony, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Application CAV 059 of 2019 at 505 Iroquois Shore Road. Good evening. I see no one in the room to canvass, but we do have to do it on record. So who is here in attendance for application CAV 059 of 2019 at 505 Iroquois Shore? I see none. Very well, floor is yours. And we are aware that this is an application for permitting a sports facility on the premises where, go ahead.
Okay. I was nervous, but there's only my husband here now, so.
Oh, no, there's nothing to be nervous. The room is empty, it's just us.
Okay. All right, mine will be really fast. I don't think there's any objections in the notes.
No,
so.
staff are in support.
Yeah. Just quickly, you know, we're a family-owned business. We've been currently in Unit 11, showed on the diagram there, for over 5 years now, and we share with a hockey shooting school. So we're a little bit jammed and we need to expand. So we've been on a waiting list at this property for over 3 years, and Unit 10 came up, which was amazing because it was right next door, so it's very ideal for us. The current bylaw, 2014-014, states that there can be a maximum net floor area of 1,000 square meters within 100 meters of the residential zone, and we are asking for the 2,280 square meters, and on December 19th, 2016, it was approved for 1,950 square meters. So now we're only asking for 330 square meters. to facilitate our gym, which is just train it, and we also do nutrition in there as well. So just a portion of the unit will be used for sports facility. We have support from town staff and planning, and I think that's it. Just to show on the diagram, it's just basically to show you that I believe why it was even in question is because the 100 meters is showing residents, you know, here where this is up a hill, up 8th line, and behind a ravine. So it doesn't really impact the residential, as someone may think. So
That puts things into perspective. Thank you.
yeah.
Are there any questions? I'm sorry, you're Cabral, right?
Cabral, yeah.
Yeah.
Amanda Cabral.
Yeah, are there any questions of Ms. Cabral at this time? I see none. Okay, if you're satisfied, we are ready to take this matter into committee, and you're familiar with the condition that staff had put. Okay, who would like to move a motion? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having conducted my site visit, reviewed this, and read the staff report as well as the inputs from the applicant, I would note I had a similar observation with respect to the intervening feature between the residential and the proposed use. I will put forward a motion of approval. I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act, and there will be little to no impact on the adjacent residential with the expansion of gym uses in this facility. So this approval would, sorry, the motion is subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed sports facility be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated January 7th, 2016. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
It's old. Okay, and I'm just confirming the date on it. Just make sure that there's not an error in that. And actually, I don't see a date on it. I'll trust in staff to have gotten that date correct. And the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Application has been approved. Thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah. Mine was the shortest. Go, Leafs, go. Okay.
Minutes from April 9th meeting to confirm? Who would like to confirm them? Ms. Murray?
Motion to confirm?
Thank you. All those in support? Mr. Atalowski wasn't here, so he cannot vote. Motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle, motion to adjourn. And we are adjourned at 9:32. Oh.
I asked the same question.
I had asked Heather for it. It was referenced by one of the applicants the other time, and I said I wanted to see it, so I guess she just photocopied and.
Specifically, what the definition of development?
Yeah, the things that.
Would you like the papers?
I'm gonna take it, don't worry. I'm just gonna give everybody.
Mike.